What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So is right now a good time to buy an iPhone? Well, it depends on who you ask and which iPhone you're referring to. If you ask me, I actually think there are a lot of great deals on used and refurbished iPhones, and I know we're sort of at that awkward midpoint where new iPhones are kind of not that far away, but if you don't need the latest and greatest device, and you don't want to spend $1,000 on something, I think I have a few solid suggestions here for you to consider. On the flip side, there are a few iPhones I actually wouldn't recommend you buy for one reason or another, and I'm going to talk about those too. I think most of what I say here will be applicable for the next few months at least, and likely even when the new iPhone 16s end up launching. So if you are in the market for a new to you iPhone, hopefully this video helps you decide which one might be best. Now, the first thing to consider here is that with iOS 18 coming this fall, I think you're likely going to want an iPhone that will receive that update. Fortunately, basically every iPhone from the last 6 years is going to get iOS 18, which is great, and you'll get most of the new software features and fun new customization options that will make those older iPhones feel fresh and current. But the new Apple Intelligence AI features, well, that's reserved for just the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, along with the rumored iPhone 16s, I'm sure. So if you are all in on AI, I suppose your decision has sort of been made for you. Speaking of the iPhone 15 Pro, I recently added Magbak's case and wallet combo to mine, and I've been really enjoying it. Magbak makes magnetic cases and accessories that go beyond MagSafe. Their phone case is thicker and nicer than Apple's own, with a great feel, premium build, and full protection, including the camera bump, a raised screen edge, and you can even swap out the button covers for a custom look. Most importantly, the corners are impact absorbing to keep your phone extra protected. Now, Magbak's case is MagSafe compatible, but pairing it with one of their magnetic accessories, like their wallet, is really the move. The case and wallet have a custom multi-magnet layout, which gives you a way stronger magnetic connection than MagSafe, and it's actually strong enough to magnetically attach the phone with the case to almost any metal surface. That's super handy. Magbak's wallet can hold a couple of credit cards, cash, and your ID, and everything slides out with the push of a thumb. There's also a built-in finger loop so you can get a good grip on everything. It's pretty much the perfect all-in-one setup. Magbak also tosses in a spare magnet with a sticky back that you can attach to something else, like your car for example, and you'll end up with literally the thinnest phone mount possible. Check out Magbak's iPhone cases, wallet, and the rest of their magnetic accessories at the link in the video description below, and thanks so much to Magbak for sponsoring this video. So if you just need an iPhone, any iPhone, the cheapest iPhone you can buy that will still work and still be updated to iOS 18, the second gen iPhone SE is your answer. This phone right now is about $135 on Amazon. And while you don't get much, just a single camera lens and a tiny LCD display, and Apple's A13 Bionic processor with just 3 GB of RAM, it's still an iPhone after all. And honestly, with its old school Touch ID home button and super compact size, I feel like some people might even like this a bit more than the bigger, bulkier iPhones that are offered today. I think its biggest disadvantage is its small battery size. This phone is definitely going to struggle to make it through the day. But if you don't use your phone that much and just want something cheap, small, familiar, and updated to the current standards, this is the best and really only option out there. By the way, when I reference the prices for the various iPhones I talk about here, I want to be showing you the Amazon Renewed listings. Amazon Renewed phones are refreshed and refurbished, used or open box devices that, in my experience, like 9 out of 10 times, you end up getting a really nice device that barely looks like it was ever used at all. But I highly recommend checking out some other third-party retailers like Swappa and PlugTech, for example, for similar deals on gently used devices. You can buy brand new previous generation iPhones from Apple and even find some deals on Apple's refurbished website too, but I personally think the best and still reliable deals are from those third-party outlets. So this might be a little controversial, but two phones I would avoid buying now are the iPhone XR and the iPhone 11. I suppose if you want the bigger display compared to the second gen SE from a moment ago, then that's fine, but I just personally feel that the XR and the 11 have too many compromises, and there are so many other iPhones on the market now that have come way down in price that are far better. The XR in particular, with its single lens rear camera and super low resolution LCD display, it's just so dated now. And the A12 processor inside, paired to just 3 gigabytes of RAM, well, it's a slower and less powerful setup than even the second gen SE I just mentioned. The XR will always hold a special place in my heart as the fun, colorful, cheap iPhone that shocked everyone as being so wildly popular, but I just don't think it's worth buying anymore, even for the $175 or so that you can find it for. It's a similar story with the iPhone 11 now too. You get a better camera setup with this phone and a bump up in processor and RAM, but it's still the same low resolution, dim, glare-prone LCD display from the XR, and with a price tag of well over $200 still, it's not that great of a value by today's standards. I would instead actually opt for an iPhone XS or XS Max. This might not make a ton of sense at first, since these phones are older than the iPhone 11, but the XS was the premium iPhone over the XR. It had a fancy stainless steel build, it had the dual camera setup, and most importantly, it had the better, higher resolution OLED display. The XS Max, of course, gave you an even bigger display to enjoy at 6.5 inches, and you even got 1 more gigabyte of RAM compared to the XR. The screen, though, is the top reason I'd consider the XS's over really any of the other iPhones I've mentioned so far. It's what you're going to be looking at 100% of the time when you use your phone, after all, and I think being an OLED display makes a big difference. And oh, by the way, the XS is now cheaper than the iPhone 11, and the bigger XS Max is just a few bucks more. For under $250, these are the two I would consider for sure. If you can save up a few more bucks and are comfortable crossing the $250 threshold, then I think the iPhone 11 Pro starts to make sense. It's about $270 via Amazon Renewed right now, and even with the tax and everything, it should eke out at just under $300 total. For that price, you get what I consider to be the first modern iPhone on this list. The first in Apple's Pro line, the first with the Retina XDR OLED display, which was better and brighter and more colorful. The first iPhone with a triple lens camera setup where Apple really emphasized the picture and video quality more so than ever before. They even included a telephoto zoom lens and a better selfie camera too. I also think the 11 Pro has a few more years of support and life left in it versus the other phones I mentioned. And overall, it's probably the second best value, all things considered, on my list here. It's just still surprisingly good for what it's selling for nowadays. I'm gonna quickly just toss in an honorable mention here. The larger iPhone 11 Pro Max, which to this day is still like the longest lasting iPhone ever with its battery, I think is somewhat enticing if you want the bigger screen, but this phone for some reason is still well over $350. I mean, it's darn near $400 after tax, and that's getting up there in price for sure. You're really only paying for the bigger screen after all, and I think since most of the newer regular iPhones have a bigger screen anyway and are actually cheaper, the 11 Pro Max doesn't make a ton of sense, but I know it's a longtime fan favorite, so I just wanted to quickly mention it. Now, the best all-around value for an iPhone right now is absolutely the regular iPhone 12. It's listed on Amazon at the moment for about $275, and for that price, you pretty much get everything you'd want and then some. A higher resolution Super Retina XDR OLED screen, the A14 processor, which, let's be honest, isn't that much worse than what's inside today's iPhone 15s. Apple has sort of stalled out on speed in recent years. You get a dual camera setup around back with the ultra-wide lens. You get MagSafe compatibility and wireless charging. It comes in plenty of fun color options too. I said the iPhone 12 was even the best value last year. I did a whole video about how good this phone is, and I'm doubling down on that. This is the iPhone that a vast majority of people should buy and keep for years to come. It's the regular iPhone that got enough of the specs and features to actually make it good, and I think it was the last iPhone Apple released that I genuinely got excited about. Heck, I'm still excited about it if you couldn't already tell. If your budget is up to, say, $500, you have two pretty different but equally enticing options: the iPhone 12 Pro Max or the iPhone 14. So the 12 Pro Max is enticing mainly because it's big, it's the Pro iPhone, so you get the triple lens camera setup and you finally get 6 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage standard. It's not the craziest, most substantial upgrade compared to some of the other iPhones I've mentioned already, but it's the iPhone that offers you everything maxed out basically for its time. And even though it's a few years old now, I feel like the 12 Pro Max has at least 3 to 5 more years of update support maybe, so it's definitely a somewhat long-term play. I just kind of have mixed feelings about the fact that it's still over $450, which arguably is less than half its original price, but still not necessarily cheap, I suppose, especially considering it's a few years old now. The other sub $500 iPhone that's worth considering is actually last year's regular iPhone 14. I was surprised to see this phone listed for like $485 on Amazon. I thought it would still be a little higher than that since it's technically not even 2 years old yet, but I'm not going to question it. This is about as new or as current of an iPhone as you can get without paying full retail price basically, and a sub $500 iPhone in today's world is always a decent buy. Its Super Retina screen is a bit brighter, the A15 Bionic processor is darn near peak power. The cameras weren't substantially upgraded, but they're close enough to what's offered today that I think most people won't mind or even notice. You also get a little bigger of a battery on top of that, so yeah, for less than $500, I think this is a pretty great option. As far as all the other iPhones you can think of, well, I'm having a hard time convincing myself of some of them. For example, the iPhone 13 is still over $400. I think the iPhone 13 would have to be under $400 to consider it, and I'm surprised that phone hasn't dropped lower in price. Maybe in another couple of months it'll be worth considering. The 13 Pro and Pro Max, those phones I think are still priced too high compared to what all you can get for cheaper. I mean, the 13 Pro is approaching $550, and the 13 Pro Max for some reason is well over $700 still. Those are some big prices to pay for phones that are approaching 3 years old now, so I think they need to have a few more months of price decline before I'd consider them. It's the same story with the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max. I mean, yeah, arguably they're both discounted a few $100s from their original launch price, but I don't feel that spending well over $650, or in the case of the 14 Pro Max, like $777 on used iPhones makes a ton of sense right now. I feel like when we're talking about getting a deal on an iPhone, it should only fall under that $500 threshold, but I'm not going to scoff at you if you decide that like 25% off or so is decent enough to consider the 14 Pros at this point. To each their own. It's a solid deal. And finally, I would obviously avoid buying an iPhone 15 right now. That should be a given. It's the current iPhone along with the 15 Pro and Pro Max. It's just a few months away now from probably being not only discounted from Apple directly once the new iPhones come out, but tons of people will be dumping the iPhone 15s they currently have for the new ones. So the market is just going to be flooded and prices will come down very quickly. The only exception I have with that is, like I mentioned at the start, if you want the new Apple Intelligence AI features in iOS 18, you have to get the 15 Pro or Pro Max at a minimum. And if you don't care about the new iPhone 16s for whatever reason, then I guess it doesn't really matter in the end. But I'd still recommend at least waiting until the fall anyway. The 15 Pro and Pro Max will certainly be cheaper whether you buy them brand new or used from the secondary market. So those are all my thoughts on the iPhones to buy and the iPhones to avoid right now. What do you guys think? Do you agree with some of my choices, or did I miss one in particular that you'd recommend? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though, or at least found it somewhat helpful. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.